Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, my name is Ashtyn. I make faith videos here on YouTube, and in today's video we are back in our Ecclesiastes series and we are picking up with chapter 5. If you haven't seen chapters 1 through 4, then I will link them in the cards up above, and I will also have the playlist linked in the description box below so you can go watch those in order. But yeah, let's jump right into Ecclesiastes chapter 5. So usually when I make these videos, I typically read through the whole chapter and then we go back and walk through it like verse by verse. But in today's video instead, we're just gonna walk through it verse by verse. So I have the New Living Translation, but feel free to follow along in whatever version you have. So it starts off by saying, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know that they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. A dream comes when there are many cares, and many words mark the speech of a fool. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin, and do not protest to the temple messenger, my vow was a mistake. Why should God be angry at what you say and destroy the work of your hands? Much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, fear God. So this chapter, specifically like this beginning part, really dragged me. But essentially, what King Solomon is saying is that we need to keep our ears open and our mouths shut as we enter into the house of God. And that's kind of harsh, right? But one of the commentaries that I read, it said fruitful and acceptable worship begins before it begins. Fruitful and acceptable worship begins before it begins. And it made me think about how when I was at my old church for a couple of months, I did the announcements, and one of the things that we were encouraged to do was to prep people for the worship experience, right? So we said the announcements, but at the end it was our job to kind of help people posture their hearts and their minds for the worship experience. And I think that that is something that is so important, because as another commentary said, when we come before God, our minds are full of our own business rather than the worship of God, right? A lot of times we come to church and we're like, oh my gosh, like I feel so heavy. I can't wait to, release all of these things that I'm experiencing. I hope that they sing my song because I just really need some good worship today. Like, I hope the pastor is there. I hope there's not a guest preacher because I don't want to listen to no guest preacher. I only want to listen to this person, right? We come with our minds on so much of our own desires, our own business, our own wants, that we don't come with the expectation to give rather than to receive, right? And so this was just really good for me, because I think there are seasons where I get into where I feel like I'm going through so much or I'm dealing with so much that church does. And church should be like, this is not to say that church shouldn't be a place where you come and you can release, but we are also coming into the house of the Lord, into the house of an almighty God, into the house of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And there should be some type of reverence when we are entering into the house of the Lord. And so that's what Solomon is saying here. And he says that it is evil to make mindless offerings to God. It is evil to come into the house of God and to raise your hand and worship and just be saying things for the sake of saying them. And sometimes I find myself in that place and I have to catch myself and ask myself, like, do you hear what you're like? Do you believe what you're saying? Because I don't know about y'all, but when you go into worship, like for me, I have some of those things that it's just gonna come off. Like every time I lift my hands, like I'm gonna say, Lord, you're worthy. Lord, you're holy, right? But sometimes you're saying it out of habit, not because you really mean it. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one. Clearly I'm not, because King Solomon is talking about it. But sometimes our practice, sometimes, what's the best way to word this? sometimes our practices are just that, right? They're just practices, but they don't actually mean anything to us. And so this is just an encouragement to check yourself when you enter into the house of God, or even if you're at home and you're worshiping, or if you're driving in the car and you're singing a worship song. Like, are you just singing it just to be singing it, or do you really think about the words that you are singing? Or are you really entering into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise, right? So after he talks about that, he also goes on to talk about not making rash promises to God and not being hasty in bringing matters before God. And he says, God is in heaven and you are here on earth, so let your words be few. And when you make a promise to God, don't delay in following through. Keep all the promises you make to him. And it is better to say nothing than to make a promise and not keep it. Then he says, don't let your mouth make you sin. And my God, that smacks me in the face, because maybe I'm the only one again, but there are so many times where I'm like, Lord, if you get me out of this, like, I swear I will never do this again. I will never go back to what you brought me out of. Like, Lord, just show up for me, and I'll X, Y, and Z, right? We're making all of these promises to God, but here's the thing: God doesn't need your promise. God does not need your promise, right? We see in the scripture, God says, if I was hungry, I wouldn't ask you for food. Like, I don't need anything from you. I saved you because I wanted to be in relationship with you, but I don't need anything from you. So I don't need you to make me a promise in order for me to do something on your behalf, right? If you're going to make God a promise, the promise is for you, right? If you're going to tell God that you're going to do something, that's for you, not for him. Somebody said, a commonly overlooked and unappreciated sin among God's people is the sin of broken vows. A commonly overlooked and unappreciated sin among God's people is the sin of broken vows. Then in verse 7, he says, much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, fear God. Therefore, fear God. So I wrote down, the remedy for us making false promises is the fear of God. The remedy of us coming into the house of worship and being more focused on ourselves than God is the fear of God. Do you really fear God? And this is not an I'm scared of God type of way, like, don't strike me down. But this is a reverent type of way. Do you understand the God that you're talking to, right? You might make promises to yourself and break them, right? I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow and you don't go. I'm going to start doing XYZ and you don't do it, right? You might break promises to yourself. You might break promises to your friend. Girl, I'm going to call you tomorrow and you don't call, right? You might break promises to your significant other. You might break promises to your family. But God is so much greater. God is so much higher. God is so, like, sometimes it's hard to put into human words, like the words that we have. Because here's the thing, all that we know about God is all that he has revealed to us, right? There is so much that God has not revealed to us, but God has given us enough to know that he is so much higher than we are. He is so much bigger. He is so much greater. He is more powerful. Like, sometimes we just have to sit back and reflect on who God is. But the fact that we use the words like, he's a good God, he's a great God. Like, I say that the movie that I just watched was great, right? I say that the food that I just ate was good. And so these are the same words that we have. And of course, like, we can't come up with, I mean, I guess we could try, but at this point, like, we use the limited language that we have to refer to God. But in our spirit, man, we have to be able to understand the magnitude of the God that we serve. And that understanding, that fear of God, is the remedy to making false promises to him, and to entering his courts and entering his gates and entering his house, not in a surrendered posture, right? So then verse 8, it says, if you see the poor oppressed in a district and justice and rights denied, do not be surprised at such things. For one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them both are others higher still. The increase from the land is taken by all. The king himself profits from the fields. And this is one thing that I just wanted to stop on, especially because in the United States, like, we just came off the election. But it says, if you see the poor oppressed and justice and rights denied, do not be surprised at such things. And I think a lot of times we allow the hard things of the world to catch us by surprise. And it's not to say that our hearts shouldn't be broken by it, right? But we shouldn't be caught by surprise that we live in a world of sin, right? But we should be looking at the remedy for that, which we know is Jesus. So don't be surprised when you see the poor oppressed and justice and rights denied. For one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them both are others higher still, right? So over all of these officials, there's someone over them telling them what to do. The increase from the land is taken by all. The king himself profits from the fields, right? The king himself profits from those who labor. It then goes on to say, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, as your wealth increases, as your riches increase, so do those who consume them. In other words, I think it said in another version that I was reading, let me find it because I like the way that it said that in the version. It says, those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness. The more you have, the more people come to help you spend it. So what good is wealth except perhaps to watch it slip through your fingers? I thought that was so funny. The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. I have seen a grievous evil under the sun. Wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children, there is nothing left for them to inherit. Everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. This too is a grievous evil. As everyone comes, so they depart. And what do they gain, since they toil for the wind? All their days they eat in darkness, with great frustration, affliction, and anger. This is what I have observed to be good. That it is appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, and to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them. For this is their lot. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart. And so I thought that this was really interesting because Solomon is kind of contrasting things here, which is a lot of what we see in wisdom literature, like the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. So let's start with what he says is evil, right? He says, this too is a grievous evil. So he talks about hoarding riches, right? He talks about how when we die, like, we can't take things with us. And he also talks about leaving the world no better than when we came. And he says that those who do this live under a cloud. They're frustrated, discouraged, and angry, right? He says all their days they eat in darkness with great frustration, affliction, and anger. Another thing he says is, I have seen another grievous evil under the sun. Wealth hoarded wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children, there is nothing left for them to inherit. So he talks about how he has seen people accumulate all of this wealth, and then due to some misfortune, whether it's like gambling, whether somebody gets sick, like whatever the misfortune is, right, something that you cannot necessarily plan for or stop from happening, as a result of this misfortune, they lose out on their wealth, and now they have no inheritance to give to their children. But they spent all of their time gathering up this wealth, right? He says this is a misfortune. He said this is a grievous evil under the sun. So then what does he say is good? He says it is good for people to eat, drink, and enjoy their work under the sun during the short life that God has given them. He also says that it is good to receive wealth from God and the good health to enjoy it, right? So it's not necessarily that wealth is bad, right? And Solomon would know this because he had all the things, right? All the riches, all the wisdom, all the wives, right? He had all the things. And so it's not that wealth in and of itself is bad, right? Because he says it is good to receive wealth from God and the good health to enjoy it. But there's a difference in the wealth that we receive from God, right? From a life dedicated to him, a life surrendered to him, and for your life to be dedicated to accumulating wealth, right? There's a difference in a life surrendered to God, in which he gives you wealth, and a life that is dedicated to accumulating wealth, right? He says it is also good to enjoy your work and accept your lot in life as a gift from God. So your lot in life is like the cards that you were dealt, right? And then he says God keeps such people so busy enjoying life that they take no time to brood over the past. In this version it says they seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart. And I pray that for you, that you will seldom reflect on the days of your life, good or bad, ugly, because God will keep you occupied with gladness of heart, that the purpose that he has given you will keep you occupied with gladness of heart, that you will find meaning in this life, that it won't feel like some of these words here in Ecclesiastes where there is no meaning under the sun. I pray that through your relationship with Jesus, that you will come to live a meaningful life. One that is not defined by riches, one that is not defined by what you have, but by what you get to do in order to bring glory to God. So that is it for today's Bible study. I pray that it was helpful for you. If it was, then go ahead and leave me a comment down below, and also be sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video and you are not subscribed, come on, what are you doing? Join the family by clicking the subscribe button below, and I will see you guys in our next video. Bye.